The courtroom was silent until a young girl's voice broke through. "Daddy is lying." What she revealed next stunned everyone, unraveling secrets of betrayal and manipulation that no one saw coming. What led her to confront her father so boldly? And how did her bravery change everything? Stay tuned for the shocking revelations that left an entire courtroom in disbelief. Also, please comment where you're listening from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Let's begin. Layla Daniels was just 5 years old, but she already understood one thing about life. Her mother, Angela, was her entire world. Their modest house in Baton Rouge wasn't much by anyone else's standards, but to Layla, it was a palace filled with warmth, laughter, and love. Angela, a single mother who worked tirelessly as a nurse, always found ways to make their small world feel magical. Whether it was the smell of buttery pancakes on a lazy Saturday morning, or the way she tucked Layla in every night with a story, Angela had a gift for making the ordinary extraordinary. One of Layla's favorite memories was of their evenings on the porch. Angela's soft voice carrying through the humid Louisiana air as she recounted stories from her childhood. Layla would lean into her mother's side, her tiny fingers playing with the fabric of Angela's scrubs. "Do you think I'll ever be as brave as you, Mama?" Layla had asked one night, her voice barely above a whisper. Angela had smiled, brushing a strand of Layla's curly hair away from her face. "You're already braver than you know, baby. One day, the world will see it too." That was Angela, always making Layla feel like the most special girl in the universe. But as Layla would soon learn, the universe doesn't always play fair. It was a sunny Tuesday morning, and Layla had kissed her mother goodbye before hopping onto the school bus. She didn't know it would be the last time. That afternoon, as the classroom buzzed with the chatter of children eager to leave for the day, the principal, Mrs. Carter, walked in with a somber expression. "Layla Daniels," she called, her voice unusually soft. Layla hesitated, her little heart already sensing something was wrong. She followed Mrs. Carter to the office, where she found her father, Brandon, standing stiffly by the window. Brandon Daniels wasn't a constant presence in Layla's life. He had drifted in and out over the years, always distant, always preoccupied. Now, as he turned to face her, his expression was unreadable. "Layla," he began, his voice tight, as if the words physically pained him. "Your mama, she had an accident. She's gone." "Gone?" Layla stared at him, uncomprehending. "What do you mean, gone? Where did she go?" Brandon's jaw tightened. "She's dead, Layla. There's nothing more to say." The words hit Layla like a tidal wave. She wanted to scream, to cry, to throw herself into someone's arms. But Brandon didn't move. He stood there, his hands in his pockets, his eyes avoiding hers. She was left alone with her grief. That night, Layla sat on the couch in their empty home, hugging a pillow as tears streamed down her face. The house, once filled with the sound of Angela's laughter, now felt unbearably silent. Brandon walked in, glanced at her briefly, and said, "You'll have to be strong now. Things have changed." And with that, he disappeared into his bedroom, leaving Layla to cry herself to sleep. In the days that followed, Layla learned that her father's coldness wasn't a temporary reaction to grief. It was who he was. Brandon didn't talk about Angela. He didn't comfort Layla or try to fill the gaping void her mother had left behind. Instead, he threw himself into work, leaving Layla to fend for herself in a house that no longer felt like home. "Can we make pancakes like Mama used to?" Layla asked one Saturday morning, her voice hopeful. Brandon didn't even look up from his newspaper. "That's not going to bring her back," he said flatly. "It's best to stop dwelling on it." Layla stopped asking for things after that. Brandon's strictness became another burden. If Layla forgot to put away her toys or spilled her juice, he would snap at her. "Do I look like I have time to clean up after you?" he'd bark, his tone sharp enough to make her flinch. Nights were the hardest. Layla would lie awake in the dark, clutching her teddy bear and wishing her mother could still tuck her in. Despite everything, a part of Layla tried to believe that Brandon was just sad. Maybe he missed Angela too and didn't know how to show it. But that hope began to fade with each passing day. The first time Evelyn, Angela's mother, visited Layla after the accident, she was horrified by what she saw. Layla, once so full of life, now seemed small and frail, her eyes dull and vacant. The house was messy, the warmth that Angela had cultivated replaced by an oppressive coldness. "Layla, sweetheart, are you okay?" Evelyn asked, sitting beside her granddaughter on the couch. I'm fine, Grandma, Layla murmured, though her voice was anything but convincing. Evelyn didn't believe her. During her next visit, she found Layla sitting on the kitchen floor, eating a sandwich made of dry bread. Layla, why are you eating that? Didn't your daddy make you dinner? Evelyn asked, her voice shaking. He said he didn't have time, Layla replied softly, tears pooling in her eyes. Evelyn's heart broke. That night, as she sat alone in her modest home in New Orleans, she made a decision. I can't let her stay there, she whispered to herself. She needs someone who loves her. But Evelyn knew it wouldn't be easy. Brandon was a controlling man, and Evelyn's modest pension didn't give her much leverage. Still, she couldn't ignore the signs of neglect. Layla deserved better, and Evelyn was determined to fight for her. Evelyn gathered her courage and filed for custody of Layla. The decision wasn't easy. She was a retired teacher living in a small house on a tight budget, and she knew Brandon wouldn't give up without a fight. But every time she thought of Layla's thin frame and lifeless eyes, her resolve hardened. When Brandon discovered the custody filing, he was furious. One evening, he barged into Evelyn's house without knocking, waving the court papers in the air. You think you can just take my daughter from me? He roared, his face flushed with anger. Evelyn stood her ground, her voice calm but firm. I'm doing what's best for Layla. She needs love, Brandon, not neglect. Brandon's rage simmered into something darker, a calculated determination. You won't win, he sneered. I'll make sure of it. And so the battle began. Brandon wasted no time trying to build his case. He started behaving like the perfect father, showering Layla with expensive toys, taking her on outings to Louisiana boardwalk outlets, and forcing himself to smile more often. Do you like your new doll, Layla? He asked one evening, handing her a gift wrapped in bright pink paper. Layla nodded, though the gesture felt strange. She didn't trust the sudden change. Brandon's attention felt forced, like he was playing a role. In addition to his facade, Brandon began planting seeds of doubt about Evelyn. You know, Grandma's getting old, he remarked casually over dinner. Taking care of a child like you must be hard for her. Layla frowned but didn't respond. She didn't like the way he talked about Grandma Evelyn. What Layla didn't know was that Brandon was going even further behind the scenes. One night, while she was in bed, he made a call. I need you to help me create something official looking, he said to the person on the other end. Something that proves Evelyn can't take care of a child. She's broke, lives in a rundown house. It won't be hard to make it believable. Layla, who had tiptoed to the top of the stairs to listen, felt her heart drop. She didn't understand everything, but she knew enough. Her father was lying. She quietly retreated to her room, tears streaming down her face. The day of the custody hearing arrived on a gray morning, the sky heavy with clouds that mirrored the tension Layla felt in her heart. Evelyn held her granddaughter's hand tightly as they approached the Orleans Parish Courthouse, a looming building that seemed to amplify their worries. Layla's small hand trembled in Evelyn's, but the older woman gave it a reassuring squeeze. Inside, the courtroom was filled with quiet murmurs as lawyers shuffled papers and families whispered among themselves. Brandon Daniels sat across the room, impeccably dressed in a tailored navy suit, his posture exuding confidence. His lawyer, a sharp man with a cold smile, leaned over to whisper something to him, and Brandon gave a faint nod. Layla couldn't help but shrink in her chair when her father's gaze briefly met hers, his expression unreadable. Evelyn, dressed simply but with quiet dignity, sat beside her lawyer, Ms. Robin Mitchell, a kind yet determined woman who had taken the case pro bono. Robin leaned in and whispered to Evelyn, Remember, this is just the first step. Whatever happens today, Layla's voice will matter. Evelyn nodded, her resolve firm. She looked at Layla and gave her a soft smile. We're here for you, sweetheart, she whispered. The judge, a tall woman with a commanding presence, entered the room, and the courtroom fell silent. She adjusted her glasses and glanced over the case file in front of her. We are here today to address the custody of Layla Daniels. Let us proceed. Brandon's lawyer stood first. His voice was smooth, rehearsed, and calculated. Your Honor, my client, Mr. Brandon Daniels, is a devoted father who has stepped up to care for his daughter after the tragic and untimely loss of her mother. He has provided her with a stable home environment, financial security, and emotional support during this difficult time. He gestured toward Brandon, who sat with a carefully composed expression. Mr. Daniels deeply values his role as a father and is committed to ensuring Layla's well-being. While we respect Mrs. Evelyn Jones's concern, her limited financial resources and advanced age make her ill-equipped to care for a growing child. Evelyn felt her cheeks flush with indignation, but she remained composed. She glanced at Robin, who gave her a quick nod. "Our turn," Robin whispered. Robin stood confidently and approached the bench. "Your Honor, while Mr. Daniels has crafted a compelling narrative, the reality of Layla's living conditions under his care paints a very different picture. Evidence will show that Layla has been subjected to neglect, emotional detachment, and a lack of the basic nurturing she needs." She paused, letting her words settle before continuing. "Mrs. Evelyn Jones, on the other hand, has consistently demonstrated her love, dedication, and willingness to provide Layla with a safe and stable environment despite her modest means." The judge nodded, her expression neutral but attentive. "Proceed." Robin introduced testimonies from neighbors and teachers who had noticed Layla's withdrawn behavior and physical changes since moving in with her father. She presented photos of Evelyn's modest but warm home, contrasting them with accounts of Brandon's dismissive treatment of Layla. Each piece of evidence felt like a small victory for Evelyn, but she knew the battle was far from over. Finally, it was Layla's turn to speak. The courtroom grew still as Layla hesitantly stood up. Her small figure seemed even smaller under the weight of so many eyes watching her. Evelyn gave her a reassuring nod, and Robin gently guided her to the witness stand. "Layla," the judge began, her tone kind but firm, "do you understand that you're here to tell us how you feel about your living situation? There's no right or wrong answer. Just tell the truth." Layla nodded, clutching the edges of the stand as she spoke. "Daddy is lying," she said, her voice trembling but clear. "I don't want to live with my dad. He doesn't care about me. He only cares about money." Brandon's lawyer immediately objected. "Your Honor, she's a child. Her perception." The judge raised a hand, silencing him. "Continue, Layla." Encouraged by the judge's patience, Layla took a deep breath. "I heard him talking on the phone," she said. "He said he needed my mom out of the way so he could get her life insurance money. He said I was just a problem." The room gasped, the sound of disbelief rippling through the courtroom. Brandon's face turned pale, his confident demeanor cracking. "That's not true," he shouted. Rising from his seat, the judge banged her gavel sharply. "Mr. Daniels, sit down. This court will hear the child's testimony without interruption." Layla's tears began to fall, but she pressed on. "He doesn't love me. He doesn't even talk to me unless he's angry. But Grandma, she loves me. She takes care of me like Mama used to." Her words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. The judge looked at Layla with compassion before addressing the courtroom. "We will recess to review this testimony alongside the evidence presented. This case is far too serious for a rushed decision." The judge's expression grew grim, and she ordered an investigation into Layla's claims. As the courtroom emptied, Evelyn knelt down to embrace Layla. "You were so brave, sweetheart," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Your mama would be so proud of you." Layla clung to her grandmother, feeling a mix of relief and exhaustion. For the first time in months, she felt like someone had truly listened to her. Across the room, Brandon sat frozen, his lawyer whispering frantically in his ear. The cracks in his carefully constructed facade were now impossible to hide. Evelyn knew this wasn't the end of the fight, but for the first time, she felt hope. The truth was out, and with it, the chance for Layla to finally have the life she deserved. The days following the custody hearing were tense. Evelyn and Layla stayed close to home, anxiously awaiting updates from Robin. The judge had ordered an immediate investigation into Layla's claims, and while Evelyn felt a glimmer of hope, she also feared what Brandon might do to counteract the mounting evidence. One afternoon, Robin called with news. "Evelyn, the investigators have confirmed tampering with Angela's car. It's damning evidence against Brandon." Evelyn's heart raced. "What does this mean for Layla?" "It means we're one step closer to ensuring her safety," Robin replied. "But we need to stay vigilant. Brandon will fight harder now that his back is against the wall." Meanwhile, Brandon was unraveling. At work, his temper flared uncontrollably, alienating coworkers and supervisors. His lawyer, once confident in his case, now seemed distant and wary. The investigation into Angela's accident revealed that critical components of her car had been deliberately damaged, leading to her fatal crash. Financial records further implicated Brandon. Just days after Angela's death, he had attempted to change the beneficiary of her life insurance policy to himself. This, combined with Layla's testimony, painted a damning picture. Still, Brandon wasn't ready to concede. Late one night, he made a desperate call to his lawyer. "We can spin this," he insisted. "There's no hard proof I did anything to the car. And Layla's just a kid. Her words can be discredited." But even as he spoke, he knew his chances were slipping away. The day of the final custody hearing dawned under a bright sky, a sharp contrast to the tension in Evelyn's heart. She dressed Layla in a soft yellow dress, Angela's favorite color, and braided her granddaughter's hair. "You're my sunshine," she said with a warm smile, though her hands trembled slightly. In the courtroom, Brandon arrived flanked by two officers. The handcuffs on his wrists told the world that his facade had finally cracked. His lawyer avoided eye contact with him as they took their seats. The judge entered, her expression solemn. "We are here to finalize custody of Layla Daniels and address the criminal charges against Mr. Brandon Daniels," she announced. Her voice carried the weight of authority, silencing the murmurs in the room. Brandon's lawyer rose first, his tone subdued. "Your Honor, while my client acknowledges past mistakes, we maintain that there is no definitive proof of his involvement in the events surrounding Angela Daniels' death. We request leniency and a second chance for Mr. Daniels to rebuild his relationship with his daughter." Robin stood next, her voice steady and resolute. "Your Honor, the evidence speaks for itself. Mr. Daniels attempted to profit from Angela's death and has demonstrated neglect toward Layla. Her testimony, corroborated by the investigation, makes it clear that he poses a danger to her well-being." Robin presented the findings. Forensic reports detailing the tampering with Angela's car, financial records showing Brandon's attempts to change the insurance policy, and testimony from teachers and neighbors about Layla's condition. Each piece of evidence built a damning case. Once again, it was Layla's turn to speak. She stood before the courtroom, her small frame trembling, but her voice unwavering. "I just want to feel safe," she said. "With my dad, I didn't. He doesn't care about me. He only cares about himself. My grandma loves me. She makes me feel like I matter." Her words struck a chord with everyone in the room. Even the judge's stern expression softened. After a long pause, the judge delivered her verdict. "Mr. Brandon Daniels," she said, her tone grave, "the evidence presented today, combined with your daughter's testimony, leaves no doubt in this court's mind. Your actions demonstrate a lack of care, a pattern of neglect, and a disturbing willingness to prioritize financial gain over your daughter's well-being." She turned to Evelyn and Layla. "Permanent guardianship of Layla Daniels is hereby awarded to Mrs. Evelyn Jones. Furthermore, Mr. Daniels will be remanded into custody for further investigation into his potential involvement in the death of Angela Daniels." Brandon erupted, shouting protests as the officers restrained him. "She's my daughter. You can't take her from me," he bellowed. But his words fell on deaf ears as he was escorted out. Evelyn pulled Layla into her arms, both of them crying tears of relief. "It's over, sweetheart," Evelyn whispered. "You're safe now." Life with Evelyn became a haven for Layla. The modest home in New Orleans felt like a castle compared to the cold, empty house she had shared with Brandon. Evelyn filled the days with warmth, cooking meals, reading bedtime stories, and sharing memories of Angela. One afternoon, Evelyn took Layla to Audubon Park, a place Angela had loved. They sat on a bench under a sprawling oak tree, the sun casting dappled light through the leaves. "Your mama used to bring me here when she was your age," Evelyn said, her voice filled with fondness. "She'd swing for hours and tell me all her dreams." Layla looked up at the sky, a soft smile on her face. "Do you think Mama can see us?" Evelyn wrapped an arm around her. "I do, and I think she's proud of you for being so strong and brave." Layla leaned into her grandmother's side, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. For the first time, the future felt like a promise instead of a threat. Though the road ahead wasn't without its challenges, Layla and Evelyn faced it together, bound by a love that nothing could break. Layla grew stronger each day, her laughter returning little by little. Evelyn, despite her years, felt renewed by the joy of seeing her granddaughter thrive. In the end, it wasn't the grand gestures or victories that defined their journey. It was the quiet, steady moments of love and resilience that carried them forward. And as they walked hand in hand through the park, the Louisiana sun shining down on them, they knew they had found their way back to hope. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What part of this story moved you the most? Do you think justice was truly served? Share your reflections in the comments below, and let's continue the conversation. Thank you for watching, and be sure to join us in our next video, where we'll explore another story of courage, redemption, and the incredible strength of the human spirit. See you next time.